Hey everyone, welcome back, and today we're going back to the illusion of living, and I'm going to be reading through Joey Drew's tips and tricks for animation and story writing. Now, this video was requested by freaking Luigi. At least I think it was. This is the comment. I'm going to read it to you. So Luigi commented, yes, I would like to see it. Well, basically how you'd explain it and how'd you react. I've read the book, by the way. Oh man, that's a sentence. Anyway, the only time I ask a question in the Illusion of Living summary, which is where this comic came from, is when I mentioned that Joey Drew has a section on tips and tricks for animation and story writing, and I said basically I could do a video, but I don't really want to. But if someone wants me to, I could. And so I think that's what this responded to, because that's the only time I ask a tangible question. Anyway, moving on, we're gonna get into the book. Also, I just gotta say, if you're gonna comment something that's a response to a question, at least put either the timestamp or restate the question, because I had to rewatch my whole video to figure out what this guy was talking about. Also, if I stop to discuss something, we're gonna put this, it was a GIF, but now it's not saving as a GIF anymore, so we're gonna put this image up whenever I'm discussing something about the book, and we're just gonna put the illusion of living up if I'm just reading the book, because I was gonna put each page on so you could kind of follow along, but I don't know, it's a lot of work, and it's quite a lot of pages, surprisingly. It's not that many pages, but it's more than I would like to screenshot. Anyway, yeah, so let's get into the book. So this entire section is called The Practical Guide to Creating the Illusion of Living. Part 1 is Joey Drew's 7 Rules to Animate By. Animators who follow these principles are able to achieve what we in the animation sphere call the illusion of living. Parentheses, that is, the illusion that your characters are real, living, breathing beings with their own hopes and dreams and desires. End parentheses. Animators who succeed in achieving the illusion of living are the highest caliber. Very few minds have been able to successfully crack the code. Thankfully, I, world-renowned and legendary animator Joey Drew, am here to guide you through those intimidating waters. In short, the 7 rules of animation are: 1. Your animation should be fluid. 2. Your animation should mostly obey the laws of physics. 3. Your animation should control the camera. 4. Your animation should be aware of their environment. 5. Your animation should be punctual. 6. Your animation should vary. And 7. Your animation should haunt people. Quick note, and take this with a slight grain of salt, because it's been a hot minute since I've read the book. So, I do remember that Joey didn't really get into drawing that much until after he started his studio. And I'm gonna bet, knowing Joey, that he didn't really animate a single frame of any of his cartoons. So, I would say he's a world-renowned animator, but he does own an animation studio, so maybe that's why he's called himself a world-renowned animator. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure he doesn't really animate. He more runs his studio. I mean, maybe on his free time. I know on his free time he draws. It was mentioned in the, give me a minute, Dreams Come to Life. But I'm pretty sure he's not making full-on walk cycles on his free time. Maybe he is. You know how much Joey loves to use his resources for, not practical things. He likes to spend money here and there. So maybe he's just making random-ass walk cycles on his free time. So for each, rule of animation, we get a paragraph explaining each one. So, rule number 1, your animation should be fluid. Think about a pail of water. When you carry the pail from one point to another, does the water inside stay perfectly still? Of course not. It sloshes about, spilling over, rippling each time it's disturbed. Living bodies are made up largely of liquids. So your animation should have a level of fluidity to them. Think of Water Lilies by Monet. How, even though they are still an image, there is nothing stiff or artificial about them. How the impressionistic style makes them come across like living, even changing things. This is what you want. This is what we want to infuse into every cell of animation. Let's take a look at the cartoon character Bendy, for example. Bendy isn't exactly a liquid, but his body bounces with each step. His iconic smile drips a little before he curves upward. Take note of the ripples in your body. The next time you fall on your backside or clap your hands, think about how your body falls and lands on the ground from a height, bouncing not all at once as one object, but feet and head first, followed by the middle. Think of weight distribution. These tiny details can take you far when trying to understand realistic movement. When I first came onto the animation scene, most people were unaware of how to properly translate a fluid motion in everyday life onto a screen. By imitating the sloshing, stretching movements of water, I was able to take the first step in creating lifelike animation. So I'm not saying this the way I want to and with the words I want to, but Bendy, because he's a rubber hose animation style and not any kind of other animation style, he has a lot more movement to him. Like, he squatches and stretches a lot more, and his arms are kind of more wiggly, if that makes sense. I don't know. Anyway, also, I'm pretty sure the animators knew how to animate, because Joey's like, when he came onto the animation scene, most people were unaware of how to properly translate the fluid motion of everyday life onto screen. I'm pretty sure they were doing fine, and just Joey was being nitpicky and wanted to exaggerate it, which is what the rubber hose animation style kind of does. It kind of exaggerates motion. Rule number 2. Your animation should mostly obey the laws of physics. If you're like me, you fell asleep in your 12th grade physics lesson as soon as your teacher started in on the math. But alas, physics, the principles of physics, is highly important to animation. Plus, as I learned in the lab, physics can actually be rather fascinating when taught by the right person. So let me be that person for you. Take Newton's first law of motion. For instance, an object at rest will stay at rest, and an object in motion will stay in motion, unless acted upon by an outside force. Now recall the jiggling scene from the classic Bendy cartoon, Nightmare Circus. Bendy looks down at the ball he rides and loses his balance. He throws the last torch as he slips from the ball. He lands on his back. The momentum causes him to do a flip and land on his rear. The momentum causes him to bounce once more after falling. Bendy is in motion, speeding along on the ball at a good clip until he's acted upon by an outside force, his own slip, followed by gravity. When he slipped, he's not just going to fall on the ground. He has momentum from him. His forward and downward motion has to go somewhere. In animation, little exaggerations are okay and expected, so long as the rest of the motion in the animation is animated realistically. The flip Bendy does, for instance, is an exaggeration, but the little bounce that happens after the flip causes the illusion that Bendy really has enough momentum to not only flip, but even do one more bounce after that. Ensuring that this motion follows the laws of physics, take your animation from the realm of fantasy into reality. Important. Tip: pay attention to the weight of the item you are animating. A feather does not drop the same way a sledgehammer or a book or a pie does. I'd like to expand on that just by giving an example. You know how characters will walk off a ledge, but they won't fall immediately, and then they don't fall until they look down? Stuff like that also can work in cartoons. Rule number 3, your animation should control the camera. Life is both the most boring and the most fascinating thing that exists. It's filled with the most exciting moments like chase scenes, and also with dull scenes of nothing, like waiting for a cab. An an animator who is hyper-focused on imitating real life will want to include those mundane moments. Stifling through the kitchen pantry to find something to eat, selecting a can of chickpeas, draining the chickpeas, deciding those chickpeas aren't good enough to eat, and returning to the kitchen pantry to find something else. But even that was boring to read, wasn't it? No one wants to see that on the silver screen. No one wants to see a young boy sitting for an hour at the window waiting for a customer needing shoe repairs to come by. No, they want to see the moment the body falls from out of the sky. Properly done animation should control the camera, meaning they should be highlight reels of actions of the cartoon characters. They should strike the right balance between what's interesting and what's not getting to what's real. That doesn't mean your characters should constantly be battling villains and racing across the city. That would be an exhausting to watch. But take Bacon Soup Bendy Cartoon. The entire short is focused on a hungry Bendy searching for something to eat. When he finally gets his moment of gratification at the end, our animators chose to pause here to illustrate each action. Shaking the can, peeling back the lid, and finally inserting the spoon to take a bite. This is because our animators were taking control of the camera, cutting out unnecessary steps to get the soup, and lingering on those satisfying moments of resolution. I just want to say for the record, I don't know if this is like the actual label, model, whatever, but it does say on there to eat with a fork. Now I'm going to say, I've never eaten a soup with a fork, but also discrepancies. Rule number 4, the animation should be aware of their environment. As you know, I love to pay attention to everything in my environment, to the reactions of the people watching a show, to the art on the walls behind the partygoers, those things that seem not to be focused on the focus of the moment, but tell us so much story in the moment. It is that our fictional characters also need to be aware of their surroundings as well. That's a weird way to write a sentence. So it is that our fictional characters... Who wrote this? It was the same person who wrote all the books, but who QC'd this sentence? Anyway, if you're guys are gonna suffer... If I'm gonna suffer, you're gonna suffer with me. We can all suffer together at this weird sentence. So it is that our fictional characters also need to be aware of their surroundings as well. That's such a weird sentence. Anyway, in the Butcher Gang, we had a lot of characters to manage. Usually it's just Bendy and Boris to look out for, but the Butcher Gang instantly doubled the number of characters we needed to animate. Yet, how boring would this cartoon have looked if we only animated one character at a time? If none of the characters reacted to what was going on around them. When Barley readies, I think, to throw the pie, you see each character being aware of their environment. Bendy cowering behind the tray, Edgar grinning and ducking, and Charlie leaning forward incredulously, I think, when he realized the pie is aimed in his direction. Hold on.
Incredulously.
Okay. That's not how I thought. That's not how it's spelled, though. Okay, fine, whatever. Fine. Incredulously. In a manner of disbelief. Yeah, that's what we're going with. Indicating disbelief? Indicating? It's not important. I love English. Anyway, these characters are intensely aware of the actions going on around them. Even Barley, who initiates the sequence by noticing and reaching for a pie on the counter. Your own animation must carry a similar level of awareness and depth. Who knows? Who knew that something as simple as a pie-in-the-face gag would require so much thought to animate? Also, I'm pretty sure anyone who's ever animated anything knows how much detail and thinking has to go into making it. That's why I haven't done a full-on animation. Also, it's really hard and I don't draw consistently, so like between movements they start to look weird. But that aside, I found the clip. Rule number 5, your animation should be punctual. By this I mean your animation should have the proper timing. That is, things should happen in a sequence that makes sense and maximizes the potential of the story. Considering you know my love of vaudeville comedy teams, timing would be something I'd be very particular about. But it's not just a well-placed punchline or a clever dance step that requires the right timing. A body in and of itself has a sense of flow and timing that makes all the difference between looking real and looking off. On most basic levels, this means making sure that Bendy bends his leg before crouching on the ground to pick up a carrot, that he rises up onto his tippy toes before placing the carrot properly, that he tilts his head to signal that he's made sure it's right. This action helps the audience follow each movement in the sequence to better help them understand what's going on in the scene. In addition to having the proper sequential timing, your animation should also have timing that maximizes the storytelling potential, whether that potential is comedic, sorrowful, or exciting. After Benny puts the finishing touches on his snowman, the sun comes up only to melt him away. Up to this point in the picture, the cartoon had been framed with Bendy at its center, so that the audience naturally followed him from start to finish. The audience has likely already forgotten about Boris the Wolf dropping his carrot. At the last moment, Boris the Wolf saves the day with fantastic comedic timing. As the cartoon appears to have taken a sudden sad turn, the wolf appears to relieve the sadness by picking up the carrot and munching on it. Classic Boris.
Classic Boris! Always got the jokes.
Rule number 6, your animation should vary. When you storyboard out your animated feature, the kinds of cells you draw should vary. While there only might be so many kinds of stories, these stories can have many different ways of telling them. We need to be innovative. We need to tell the story of the boy deciding to steal candy and not from the point of view of the angel and demon on his shoulders. We need to have a detective solve the murder only for the murderer to end up the hero. So, we need variation in our animation. Unpredictable settings, unpredictable points of view, and unpredictable shots. We need to shake up an audience's expectations. Now, it is true that the bread and the butter of the animation industry is a standard shot, frame only your necessary characters with minimal background. This shot is great for a sequence, but sometimes showing close-ups can help the audience zero in on the character's reaction, when zooming out can show the audience how small and insignificant the character feels in the full scope of their environment. We did many varying shots on our celebrated picture, Tombstone Picnic. Perhaps most iconic shot is the piece is the wide shot of Bendy, whose visual relationship in the shadowy figure is shown in stark contrast by the frame and the scale. Varying cells like this adds flavor and emotional depth to your animation. And rule number 7, your animation should haunt people. Haha, that one's a joke, but not entirely a joke. The animation and cartoon characters that are fully realized and memorable are a different breed from your run-of-the-mill cartoon cat. How dare you talk about Felix the Cat, or maybe even Garfield, probably Felix the Cat. How dare you talk about Felix the Cat that way? I've never actually watched Felix the Cat, but that's rude. He would never talk about Mickey the Mouse like that. Anyway, how does one create a cartoon that sticks around long after that final shot? How does the illusion remain in the audience's mind, haunting them, as it were? Well, if that isn't the million-dollar question. One way to achieve this is to add little quirks to everything you draw. Give your main character an overbite or a tick, like touching his ear while talking. Look at the people around you. What quirks do they have that you can translate onto page? Think of Detective Sinclair and his chain smoking, or my father and his hunched figure. Think of Lottie and that curl on her forehead. You know how Alice Angel has kind of a curl on her hair, like over her forehead? I think he's saying that design choice is based off of his old friend Lottie. Anyway, these little side actions might seem like a waste of effort, but they make characters seem real and thus easier to relate to. Beyond the characters themselves, look at their clothes, their home, their belongings. Every good actor makes use of the setting they're dropped into and the props that surround him. Think about what you can add to a character's surroundings that might say more about them. Is their home filled with junk? What do they have in their fridge? Are their clothes brand new or tattered and torn? Did their apartment come with its furniture like my first one did, or is everything tasteful and from the old times like Miss Richmore's home, or is everything new and modern like mine? Break out of the sequence to dive into the finite details of the character will help ensure your character haunts your viewers for years to come. The fact that he keeps saying that your animation should haunt people, my mind keeps going to the Ink Demon. The newer one from Dark Revival, because I don't know, I feel like he's creepier, he's more menacing because he's larger, he's got sharper claws. He's just generally more monster-like, but I don't know. There's always those things that Joey say that I overanalyze, and I'm like, wait a minute. You know, those wait a minute moments? Yeah. Anyway, that was painful. We got a little bit more. Next part are Joey's 3 rules to telling a good story. The illusion of living is not captured by animation alone. Though I will say I think that the animation process is the most important part of achieving the goal. After all, this entire book details my quest to discover that cartoons were the answer to how I would share the illusion of living with the world. And there you go. I said this in my summary, or at some point. The reason Joey Drew started animation is I choke you not to share the illusion of living with the world. 'Cause that is normal. Yes. That being said, once you have understood how to make your characters appear real to the eyes, you now need to make them appear real to the soul. This comes from the stories you are telling and the characters you choose to create. The rules are following. 1. Create dynamic personalities. 2. Choose the right details to tell. And 3. Structure for dynamism.
Dynamism.
Rule number 1. Create dynamic personalities. Before animating anything, we need to know what to animate. Or who. I like to go back to what I shared about classic vaudeville. The actors that were most popular and most dynamic were the ones that were the easiest to relate to. and understand. Stock character types, we call them, sorry. The smart one, the stupid one, the strong one, and the sneaky one. These characters all follow the basic rules, and we knew time and time again how they were going to behave in any given situation. It was the predictability of their behaviors that made it funny. The characters might be confronting a new situation that they and we, the audience, weren't familiar with, but we, the audience, were always one step ahead, and that made the anticipation of the moment all the more thrilling, and that made it so real. We like to think that as humans and not characters, we are complicated and unique, but ultimately, we too break down into types. Kyle was rich and ignorant, Detective Sinclair clever and judgmental, Lottie sweet and hopeful. Ultimately, it was very easy for me, Joey, to know how to interact with them, to get what I needed from them, because I could see where their act was going. I got to the end before they did. People want to see themselves in characters, and yet they don't realize that they are themselves characters. So pick a strong type, a solid one thing to make your character to make the character who they are. Then pick some friends with different personality types so there is always some shade of conflict. Conflict is always exciting, as we've already illustrated. In the case of Bendy, we knew we needed someone he had to frustrate, someone with less of a devilish spirit, not necessarily an angel though. We did create one as well, but a foil and opposite, and that was Boris. All Boris wanted was to eat and to be left in peace, and we all knew Bendy would never let him. The Butcher Gang were another excellent foil. They stopped at nothing to get back at Bendy for his hijinks, and took revenge very seriously. Bendy takes nothing seriously, so he would always win, even when it seemed impossible, with 3 against 1. Rule number 2, choose the right details to tell. As I stated before in rule number 3 for animation, if I told you about my day-to-day in every detail, even though there were a lot of interesting things that happened, you find it boring. That's because living life and observing life are not the same thing. This is where we bring the impressionistic painter's idea back. Just like how they paint what they saw and what was not necessarily there, how they painted the impression of an image, so to do we need to tell the impression of a story. We don't need all the details, and we certainly don't need the story to begin the moment the characters wake up. Sorry. It is our job to create the illusion of living, but only show the parts that matter to the story. I'm going to click pause there. While it is important to tell what is important to the story, it's weird, because Joey does like to bend reality and things so it better fits his own perception of things, or the narrative that he wants to tell. Like, even in real life, he will purposely leave out details or embellish details of a story. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too into this, because it is good. You should only tell what's important, but also, Joey's weird. And somebody texted me! Bendy is walking down the street to a shop. We don't need to see him put on his shoes that morning. Boris is eating at a picnic. We don't need to see him pack it. Start the story just before the conflict begins. Wrap it up after the climax. Be quick and ruthless with the details you choose to include or not. They say less is more, but less is also more real. And finally, rule number 3, structure for dynamism. A word I still can't say. Anyway, what is the structure of something dynamic? This plays into rule 2 of knowing what to include and what not to. Of course, but this is also a very basic story structure that more people know about than just me. In this particular case, this isn't about the illusion of living philosophy, and is rather one of the rare instances where you can look to other creators doing the same thing. Okay, just for the record, I think a lot of those animation tips were pretty basic animation tips, and those story tips already were pretty basic story tips. Joey doesn't need to act like he invented them. But anyway, there is nothing wrong with looking at the old masters, as we have already done with artists and novels. The wisest man knows that there are wiser out there. In this case, there is a very basic and tried and tested structure to storytelling, and that you probably already know about. In every story, play, radio play, book, and comic strip, you'll see it, and it goes like this. First, you have the incident, something that happens to get the story going. I think it's like the introduction. Actually, maybe even not. I don't know if this is like, they have those, like, there's the introduction, there's rising action, there's climbing action, falling action, and conclusion. I don't think this is exactly like it, but it's similar enough. Anyway, so first you have the incident, something that happens to get the story going. Then you have what we call the rising action. Okay, never mind. As the conflict gets more and more heated and extreme. Then you have the climax, the moment of truth, the resolution of the whole story. Then you have a little moment of calm after the storm to ground the audience once again. Okay, yeah, this one has 4 steps instead of the 5 that, we're used to seeing. This is a tried and true structure that you'll never be led astray, and your audience will love you for it. And there's a kind of like outro kind of thing, I don't know what to call it. There you have it, some tips from yours truly that will change the way you tell your story forever. To go even more in depth would require to write a whole new book, and who knows, maybe in the future that will happen. But for now, this will get you started on the right path if you trust me, which I know you do. So that was kind of fun to do. Sorry, I stutter a little bit and pause. I'm trying to sound out words in my brain and like with my mouth without saying it, and I did cut a lot of things where I stumbled over words. Dynamicism? I still can't say. Sorry about that. Dynamism? It's not important. But anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe or don't. I don't care. And listen to my outro.